Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Quinn the GM, and I'm here to bring you my first ever top 10 list on the channel. I thought it was an interesting format that I hadn't really explored before, and I thought that it could be interesting, and I thought that people might like it. So today's topic is going to be my 10 favorite subclasses in D&D 5e. Keep in mind that this is entirely my opinion. This is not the 10 mechanically best subclasses. Hexblade's not on here. Bear Totem's not on here. This is just purely classes that I've had good experiences with, or I like in concept, or I think has really interesting mechanics for different builds. So overall, this is going to be purely opinion and speculation. So don't worry about anything being too. I'm not saying anything's better than another necessarily, just that I like it more. Thank you all for watching and joining me here. And if you do enjoy this, be sure to subscribe. That really helps. And I know a lot of my viewers aren't subscribed, so I'd love to grow the channel and see if you guys want to see more of what I do, see more content like this. So yeah, let's start off the list. Number 10 is the Wild Magic Sorcerer, and this holds a bit of a weird and distinct award for me in that it's the class that I'm far and away the most excited to see in 5.5e or 6e or whatever's coming next from Wizards. We saw that recent PHP class survey earlier, and I did fill that out and talked about how I wanted to see the Wild Magic Sorcerer developed. And I think it's really positive, the direction they've been taking sorcerers lately, especially in like Tasha's, where you have things like the Clockwork Soul, the Aberrant Mind, that have really interesting mechanics and very strong abilities, in addition to a full expanded spell list, kind of fill out the sorcerer's repertoire a bit more. I really like that, and I think that compared to the older things like the Draconic Ancestry or the Wild Magic Sorcerer from the Player's Handbook, those are quite, they've fallen by the wayside quite a bit. However, I love the Wild Magic Sorcerer's core concept and random table. I think those are both inherently incredibly fun, and when I've had them in my games, I've had a ton of fun with them. However, the class itself is definitely a bit clunky, and it can be difficult to access that table at times, and that class as a whole just really doesn't give you much that you can just utilize intentionally, which isn't great. But I think that overall, I just like the flavor so much that I had to put it on the list somewhere, so it's solidly at the bottom of it, but it's still a class that I really enjoy. Number 9 is another weird one. It's the Grave Domain Cleric. It is kind of very much a duality in my mind, in that I love the flavor and mechanics of this class, and the territory it covers is some of the most fun area I've ever seen for a Cleric subclass. The threshold between life and death and what makes that important is just such a fascinating concept for any game, and I feel like having a Cleric that focuses on that is really interesting because they inherently focus on deities and the kind of afterlife aspect of that, but they also are the people who bring people back from the dead, and it's interesting to consider what moral quandaries might exist in that. Furthermore, I think the design of their abilities is fantastic. I think they're one of the best healers in the game. They're able to just pick people up from far away really easily, either by getting max healing on people who are down or having a cantrip as a bonus action to stabilize people, which is crazy good because you can cast a spell and do that in the same turn. However, as a DM, this is one of the most frustrating classes to run in any game, particularly because anytime a player continually cancels a crit or is able to make your enemies vulnerable to any next attack, it can be a tad frustrating, but it's very fun to work with and kind of have that very strong abilities on the party side to be able to kind of balance against that for their sake and kind of make it challenging despite that. Particularly, I wasn't really aware of this class before I saw Caduceus in Critical Role, but he later became one of my favorite characters in that campaign, particularly because of the interesting nature of the core concept of the class itself, which is why I like it so much and why it's on this list. 8th is the Great Old One Warlock. This class is on here for one reason and one reason alone, and that is its story potential. If I had a nickel for every time a Great Old One Warlock has had a massive impact on my overall campaign, I would have 4 nickels, which is weird that it's happened 4 times, but it does. Because the idea of just being attached to this unknowable entity that may or may not know that you're attached and could potentially gain influence as you level and as you grow in power, it might be growing in awareness of your presence. And that's just such a fascinating concept. I've had people be tied to Dendar, the Night Serpent, who ended up being the main villain of my first campaign. I've had people tied to He Who Lurks Far Away, which is a kind of name I gave to Gunadar, I think? I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name, but I didn't really have to for the entire campaign because it was all shrouded in mystery, which is what I love with the Great Old One. It's another class element, like Wild Magic Sorcerer, that has a bit of the kind of PHB underpowered syndrome going on, as it tends to happen from that book, particularly with just the general power creep of 5e as it's gone on. However, I don't think it's nearly as bad of a case as that as the Wild Magic Sorcerer, because there are still elements to this class that make it distinct, that you can just use rather than relying on if it occurs, you can maybe do something. But overall, I think the Great Old One Warlock is one of the best story potential classes in the game. 7th is the Paladin, Oath of the Watchers. Similar to the last one, I love the story potential of this. The idea of a group that is overseeing the boundaries between the planes and ensuring the safety of everybody on all of them is just such a great concept. And I love the idea of paladins being bound to things other than necessarily a holy oath, not necessarily to a singular deity, but maybe to this idea or this organization's core belief, making an oath to that and drawing your power from that source. I also think mechanically it's great. Any paladin with counterspells an A+ in my book. I also really like Redemption, that very narrowly made the list. But however, I really like the Channel Divinity as well. Being able to get resistance to any mental saves is great, and I know that my players who went through a Mind Flayer-centric half the campaign last campaign would have been really, really happy to have that in their party. Albeit it can be niche in certain situations, but it tends to be more helpful than it's not. Number 6 is the Horizon Walker Ranger Conclave. Take everything I just said about the Oath of the Watcher's Paladin and add in the coolest teleportation ability in the game, bar none. Distant Strike, the Horizon Walker Ranger's 11th level ability, is, I think, my favorite ability in 5th edition. You get an extra attack per turn if you attack a different target with each of your attacks, which is really, really cool, especially for like crossbows or bow wielders to be able to fire at a group of targets rather than just one. And additionally, you get to teleport 10 feet after every single attack, which is so cool. The idea of just with a crossbow, attacking, teleport, attack, teleport, attack, teleport is just so cool to me. And I played a Horizon Walker Ranger before, but I've never gotten to the point of having this ability. And I'd love to in a future campaign. Overall, I think that the Rangers in Xanathars and in Tasha's are a great step up from the PHB, and I think that they've been really stepping it up in terms of balance on these and making them unique and powerful subclasses in order to balance what is a more toned down base class. But I think that with Tasha's and with Xanathars, Rangers is quite balanced overall, and I like all of them really, but Horizon Walker is easily the top of that heap. 5th is the Fathomless Pact Warlock. I have a soft spot for anything nautical, and I think that the idea of something very Lovecraftian and eldritch in nature is such a cool concept for a Warlock patron. That's part of why I like Great Old One so much, because the kind of Cthulhu mythos there, in that anytime I can tap into that is fun, even when I'm not playing Call of Cthulhu. But overall, I really like just the variety of ocean-based subclasses in 5th edition, and this is my favorite of the lot, particularly because of just all the abilities really lending flavor to the idea of being bound to something in the sea. I really like the idea of like summoning tentacles and having people bound by them, restrict movement, and then later being able to absorb damage with them. It's such a cool concept, and I think that it really just adds a lot to the Warlock's kit as well, in that especially if you can get Hex up and get that in addition to Eldritch Blasts, I think it's one of the most potent damage dealers in the game, and I don't think it's much talked about, but that's getting into more bit of optimization type stuff, so I won't bore you with that here. But yeah, no, Fathomless Pact Warlock. I've played briefly, but I need to play more, and it's one of my favorites. 4th is the Scout Rogue, and it's incredibly underrated. The idea of being a completely martial ranger and getting expertises and movement bonuses that go along with that is such a cool feel for a character. It's a lot of what like a ranger is typically in media. It's like Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. He didn't have any spell casting per se. He was just very good at tracking. He was very good at perceiving, and that allowed him to really fill out that role that he had. I've seen people consider him a fighter. That might be because he has no magic. I don't think he's a fighter. I think he's a lot closer to ranger, and I think if he was directly something, it'd be the Scout Rogue subclass. I just think it's a great balance of utility and potential damages, particularly as you get higher in levels, you get more damage-based abilities that really allows your utility kit you get in early levels to shine. Also, any class of expertise is something I really like, in that I think it adds a lot of flavor to a character, and I just like playing characters who are very good at skills. That's something I enjoy doing generally. So yeah, overall, Scout Rogue, favorite rogue subclass by a mile. 3rd is the School of Abjuration Wizard, and it's another one that I've played, which is saying a lot because I don't get to play a lot recently. The Abjure is such a nice kind of change of pace from the other wizards. I think it's cool to be able to tank a little bit and have this barrier that you have access to, and you have the ability to both heal it and decide when to use it on others, which is really unique. I think being able to expend a resource to take damage for other people is something that other classes should do more. Particularly, I think Paladins have some abilities in some subclass, I want to say Oath of the Crown, that is able to do that, but I think that the wizard being able to do that is even cooler because you have so much less health and it's more meaningful. Furthermore, it created a lot more of an interesting risk-reward relationship in terms of when I cast my spells. Particularly, like, I wouldn't necessarily cast Mage Armor at the start of the day. I wouldn't want to waste that spell slot, and I wouldn't want to do it immediately, because if I wait until after my barrier is depleted, I could also heal as a part of gaining that AC. So it really creates an interesting kind of benefit drawback dynamic there, and I think that it's something that really isn't talked about a ton. And also the higher level abilities are just really, really good. You become the best counterspeller or dispel magic or in the entire game. You get to add your proficiency bonus to those checks, which is nuts, and you can essentially guarantee that you can get rid of any magic. And furthermore, just getting spell resistance at 14th level is also nuts, and I really like it, and I think it can add a lot of flavor as a mage who's able to take down other mages extremely well, and that is just something that I really enjoy tapping into. I've made no secret my love of Paladins, and the Oath of Vengeance Paladin is easily my number 2 on the list. It's a class I played for the longest, because my longest running character, a Paladin named Thermidor Luther, was a Vengeance Pact for, I think, most of that game. It's really, really cool to have a Paladin that's able to be morally right, and as I said with the Watchers, be bound to something other than specifically a deity's holy order. The idea of swearing to some deity of bloodlust and having to fight against that and figure out that vengeance is not necessarily the only option there is something that is just a really cool story potential, and I think that that's been seen in a lot of media for that reason exactly. I just think mechanically it's quite fun. I think the spell list is one of the best on the Paladin, particularly for haste, which is way too fun to cast and then immediately lose concentration on and be stunned for a round, but I digress. I also think that the Channel Divinity Vow of Enmity, in addition to having one of my favorite names in 5th edition, is the most powerful Paladin Channel Divinity, bar none. Just being able to pick an enemy and just get advantage on them for an entire fight is madness, especially with the potentiality of critting and adding smites to those just for free. It's just so fun, and I really enjoyed my time doing it. I am very biased in this class's favor, but I am perfectly happy with being biased in this case. And first up, surprising no one if you saw my video a couple weeks ago, is the College of Spirits Bard. This is the most flavorful class in the game, in my opinion, and it really taps into my idea of a bard as a storyteller more than necessarily a bard as a musician, and I love that it does that. I think that the idea of this spirits table is really cool, and it's similar to the Wild Magic Sorcerer in that it's a random table. However, it's like they kind of address the concerns I had with Wild Magic Sorcerer. They have this random table, but they also have a wide variety of other features in order to give them a powerful kit outside of that random element and allow them to be more consistent in addition to having that fun randomness when they want it. I also love the idea of just a general tarot reader being a character. That seems just really cool to me. And I think that I just really want to play this class, I think. I think it's always fun to roll a spirit session for these. But yeah, this has been the video. That was the whole list here. Let me know if you enjoyed it, if you want to see more, what you might want to see another top 10 on, or any other video topic. I've got a lot of ideas in the works. If you want to see more stuff of mine as well, you can check the description. I'm on Twitter. I also do publish content on DM's Guild. I just published a Bard subclass, being the College of Absurdity. This is all of my 10 favorite official subclasses, but if you want me to rank unofficial subclasses, I can do that as well. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff that everybody says that I guess I have to say too. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you soon.